Roll call for the 6th legislative day, Tuesday, January 17th. Anderson. Here. Baldwin. Here. Barlow. Here. Beitman. Here. Bodnar. Here. Bouchard. Here. Brennan. Here. Case. Present. Cooper. Here. Dockstetter. Ellis. Present. French. Here. Furphy. Here. Garou. Here. Hicks. Here. Hutchings. Here. Ide. Here. Jones. Here. Kinski. Here. Kolb. Present. Landon. Here. Larson. Here. McEwen. Here. Nethercott. Here. Pappas. Here. Rothfuss. Here. Salazar. Here. Schuler. Here. Scott. Here. Steinmetz. Here. Dockstetter. Excused. President Driscoll.
Here.
30 present, 1 excused.
Prayer by Richard Gilbert, retired, First United Methodist.
May we pray. Almighty God, source of strength and wellspring of resources, you have known us during days of despondency and in hours of victory. By your graceful presence, enable us to sail with an even keel, enduring storms and enjoying calm. In all our variables of life, may we know your valuable, steady presence of love and grace, justice and righteousness, your guiding hand of helpful purpose and correction of course. Guide us on our course in life so that we will not end in shipwreck, but sail the ever-changing seas with courage and faithful fortitude. Fill us with the fullness of faith and justice, the purpose of righteousness, and the ability to know and do that which is right. Grant us gratitude for the wisdom and endurance of days past. May this present day unfold in a way so that at its close we may hear you speak to us, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Looking forward to future days and years, may we know your grace is sufficient to sustain as we seek to be ambassadors of your eternal will in service to people, country, and you, our eternal God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And all the people who were able said, Amen.
Senator McEwen, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading clerk, please read the Journal Committee report.
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports the Journal.
Pay attention.
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports the Journal of January 16, 2023 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Larson, Chairman.
Are there any objections? There being none, the report is adopted. Doctor for the day is Christopher Shamber of Sheridan, Wyoming. Don't see our doctor here, but we have one. Today in Wyoming history, in 1933, a Bagg school bell was rung by Bells Hope at the Bells of Hope presidential inauguration celebration. Quote of the day: success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. That's a good one. Mind to pay the Senate Courtesy Fund for your meals? We only got about half of you paid. They'll shut us off on food if you don't get paid up. So we have a very, very special guest this morning. This morning we're joined by Mrs. Wyoming 2023, Charlene Jones. Ms. Jones is an author, advocate, and a life coach who resides in Casper, Wyoming with her husband. The platform that she is promoting during her reign as Miss Wyoming is being a champion for empowering people, particularly women and children, who have emerged from abusive relationships. Fellow senators, please help me welcome Miss Wyoming to the Senate.
Thank you.
I've invited her to say a few words for us, and thank you very much for your causes. They're pretty noble ones.
Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate the opportunity to come and edify you. You have a tough job ahead of you. My husband and I, when we first drove into Wyoming, felt the peace and the joy and the strength of Wyoming's land and the people in it. Everyone was so friendly. Wyoming is a place of firsts. You were the first to allow women to vote. You were the first to allow women into the Senate and the House. We wanted to be in a place that had our shared values, and that's why we chose Wyoming. The values that you pass through this place will make a difference for our children and their children, and we thank you for that. We appreciate all the hard work that you do. We appreciate the common ground that you find. And it's our prayer as a family that this session goes smoothly and is a champion for women and children and our veterans. So thank you so much for allowing me and my husband, who is also a veteran, to be here to edify you. Thank you.
Hear, hear. A little gift for you. We wish you luck as you represent the Cowboy State in March at America's National Pageant in Las Vegas. Best of luck from all of us. Thank you. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, January 16, 2023, message number 6. Mr. President, this is to inform you that the House has adopted the temporary House rules and joint rules of the 66th Legislature as the permanent House and joint rules of the 67th Wyoming State Legislature General Session, amended as follows, dispensing with further reading. Signed, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Introduction, reading, and reference of bills. Senate File 125, first reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 125, property tax limiting the maximum taxable value increase, sponsored by Senator Salazar.
Senate File 125 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Senate File 123, first reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 123, Military Dependents School Choice, sponsored by Senator Boner.
Senate File 123 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Senate File 124, first reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 124, Foreign Ownership of Agricultural Land, sponsored by Senator Salazar.
Senate File 124 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Senate File 122, first reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 122, Non-Resident Workers Vehicle Registration Extension, sponsored by Senator Driscoll.
Senate File 122 is referred to Committee Number 6, Travel. Senate File 119, first reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 119, Defend the Guard Act 2, sponsored by Senator Ide.
Senate File 119 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Reports from standing committees.
January 16, 2023. Mr. President, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred Senate File 35, School Crosswalks and Pedestrian Crossings Appropriation, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman. January 16, 2023, Mr. President, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 22, Wyoming Public Safety Communication System Funding. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Kolb, and Pappas. No, Senator Furphy. Senator Boner, Chairman. January 16, 2023, Mr. President, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 21, High Occupancy Vehicle Lanes. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, and Pappas. No, Senator Kolb. Senator Boner, Chairman.
Bills on second reading. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate File 35, School Crosswalks and Pedestrian Crossings Appropriation, and Senate File 22, Wyoming Public Safety Communication System Funding, both have appropriations. I ask that they be re-referred to Committee Number 2 Appropriations at this time.
Without objection, so ordered. Bills on second reading. Senate File 10, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 10, Licensed Professional Counselor Compact.
Senate File 10 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 14, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 14, Wyoming National Guard Professional Malpractice Liability.
Senate File 14 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 15, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 15, Military Leave for State Employees.
Senate File 15 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 18, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 18, Benefits for Spouses of Law Enforcement Members.
Senate File 18 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 25, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 25, District and Prosecuting Attorneys Bar License Requirement.
Senate File 25 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 26, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 26, Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact.
Senate File 26 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 31, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 31, Adjacent Land Resource Data Trespass Repeal.
Senate File 31 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 32, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 32, Prohibiting Drones Over Penal Institutions.
Senate File 32 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 36, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 36, Investment Funds Committee Selection Panel Amendments.
Senate File 36 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 37, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 37, Podiatry Medical Services, Medicaid.
Senate File 37, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 55, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 55, Chancery Court Vacancies Extension Amendment.
Senate File 55, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 69, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 69, Electronic Records Retention.
Senate File 69, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 71, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 71, State Loan and Bond Programs.
Senate File 71, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 95, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 95, Moon Landing Day.
There is an amendment. Could we have the amendment read in, please?
Senate File 95, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 1, after.
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 95 and ask for your aye vote. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday I mentioned that we might have been leaving off the third member of the Apollo 11 crew, Michael Collins. He played an important role in piloting the command module to get those astronauts to and from the moon safely. So I thought it was appropriate that we don't forget old Michael Collins. So as you see on page 2, line 1, where after the word safely, we're inserting including Michael Collins, who piloted the command module, comma. I'll stand for any questions.
Question being called for. We're voting on Senate File 95, second reading amendment number 1. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 95 has passed. Question being called. Senate File 95, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Bills on third reading and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do you have a consent list? Thank you, and sorry.
Mr. President, we do have a consent list, and I move third reading consent list, which is as follows. Senate File 7, Definitions of Opioid Antagonist Amendments. Senate File 9, Medicaid Covers Licensed Pharmacist. Senate File 42, Taxation of Cigars. Senate File 47, Education Repeal of Immunity for Corporal Discipline. Senate File 63, Tax Administration Revisions. Senate File 73, Lawful Fences. Senate File 74, Slow-Moving Vehicle Amendments.
Would anybody like any bills removed from the list? Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to remove Senate File 73, Lawful Fences.
Without objection. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? Senate File 7, Definition of Opiate Antagonist Amendment. Senate File 9, Medicaid Coverage, Licensed Pharmacist. Senate File 42, Taxation of Cigars. Senate File 47, Education, Repeal of Immunity for Corporal Discipline. Senate File 63, Tax Administration Revisions. Senate File 74, Slow-Moving Vehicle Amendments. The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
On the consent list, Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstader? Ellis? French? Murphy? Guru? Hicks? Hutchings? Ide? Jones? Kinsky? Cole? Landon? Larson? McEwen? Nethercott? Pappas? Rothfuss? Salazar? Schuler? Scott? Steinmetz? President Driscoll.
Aye.
On the consent list, 31 aye. Senate File 7, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 7, 31 aye. Senate File 9, are there any changes? Beitman, aye to no. Hutchings, aye to no. French? Aye to no. McEwen? Aye to no. Ide? Aye to no. Salazar, aye to no. Larson? Aye to no. Cole, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 9, 23 aye, 8 no. Senate File 42, are there any changes? Case, aye to no. Scott? Scott, no. Murphy, aye to no. Brennan, aye to no. Rothfuss, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 42, 26 aye, 5 no. Senate File 47, are there any changes? Closing vote. Kinsky, aye to no. Closing vote. Baldwin, aye to no. Dockstader, aye to no.
Driscoll, aye to no.
Driscoll, aye to no. Kolb, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 47, 26 aye, 5 no. Senate File 63, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 63, 31 aye. Senate File 74, are there any changes? Ide? Ide, no. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 74, 30 aye, 1 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 7, definition of opiate antagonist amendment, Senate File 9, Medicaid coverage, licensed pharmacist, Senate File 42, taxation of cigars, Senate File 47, education, repeal of immunity for corporal discipline, Senate File 63, tax administration revisions, and Senate File 74, slow-moving vehicles amendments have passed the Senate. We are on third reading of Senate File 73. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does it need to be read in first, or you want me to speak?
It was read in, I believe, was it not? Okay. Senate File 73, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 73, lawful fences, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee, an act relating to agriculture, livestock, and other animals.
Senator Steinmetz, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, body, for the good questions you had on this bill and for thoroughly vetting it on a committee of the whole. As you've probably noticed, we've laid it back for several days because we're trying to figure out how to get this just right, because it lies in a very sensitive area of our statute. And the Good Ag Committee in the joint interim, they did a lot of good work on this bill, but we feel it would be better housed in the subdivision statutes, so we're reworking the bill. So I would ask you to vote no on Senate File 73, lawful fences. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly respect the desire to get it exactly right, and there's lots of new expertise on the Joint Agriculture Committee. And so long as we have, I think I have a public commitment that we'll see another bill this session that'll deal with this very important issue. I'd say vote your conscience. I might still be a yes, but certainly understand that they're doing their best to work and support the current committee's efforts as well.
Further questions? Question being called. Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 73. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? No. Barlow? No. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? No. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? No. Garou? No. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? No. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? No. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Pappas? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
No.
No. Cooper? 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 Aye to no. Thank you. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Senate File 73, 4 aye, 27 no.
Senate File 73, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 73 has failed to pass the Senate. First blood, folks. Want to congratulate you guys for all the work. You know, we're moving right through the bills. We've done it at a nice clip, and we're having some good debate. I want to thank everybody for what they've done. It actually is pretty admirable to be at the point we're at. That being said, I've got a little announcement that Director Olbrecht sent this out. They've still got a huge number of bill drafts, so typical session, they've got about 300 House bills and 170 Senate files. They've got 160 House bills out so far and 132 numbered with 15 to 20 waiting. So for those of you that got bills out there, the cutoff is noon on the 12th day of session, which is January 26th. But I encourage you, because of our staff loads, to get with your staff, the stuff they can get out. Let's either get them numbered or pull them back. But I really hate to see us on the last day having all our staff working piles of overtime because we haven't followed up on our bills. So if you guys could get together and keep getting those worked out, it would be very helpful. Thank you. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business, consideration of bills on general file.
Mr. President, I move the microphone, please.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole.
You've heard the motion. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carried over the objection of Senator Ellis. Please approach the desk, please.
All righty. Committee of the Whole will now come to order. Mr. Majority Floor Leader?
Yeah. Madam Chairman, members of the body, I know it's hard to see some of these, and so we're trying to get this general file. It's on your computer, but as we update these things and come on, sometimes I'll move those bills up and down. But I want to just go over those for some of those that have a hard time seeing. So the sequence this morning is going to be Senate File 83, K through 12 school facilities leasing. The next one we're going to take up is Senate File 99. Witnessing of wills, remote methods, Senate File 84, education model students, attendance policies, school finance. The next one's Senate File 51, school finance regional cost adjustment, and then Senate File 21. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, the first bill for our consideration is Senate File 83. Will the reading clerk please read in the Senate file?
Senate File 83, K-12 School Facility Leasing, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, an act relating to K-12 school facility leasing, was referred to committee number 4, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Brennan, Rothfuss, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Scott, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Scott?
Madam Chairman, I move when the Committee of the Whole rise and report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 83 do pass, and I yield to Senator Rothfuss for an explanation of the Senate file.
Senator Rothfuss?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, Senate File 83 is a bit of a cleanup of some work that we did through the School Facilities Committee a few years back. We looked over our leasing statutes with regard to school foundation, and we have a limited number of school facilities around the state that are being leased at any given time. Some of those by charter schools, some of those by the school district. And we did a review and tried to implement a simple policy which would provide for all of the finances related to that lease in one lump sum lease that would then have a price set based on a locally appropriate rate. And it seemed like a great idea at the time, and I still think it was a great idea at the time, but there was one little quirk that surfaced, and this bill addresses that quirk. And that quirk is the circumstance where major maintenance funding, which is a substantial part of a lease payment in the way the state of Wyoming does the calculation, is just included in the lease payment rate. As a result, it is difficult for the school district or the charter school board to really enforce the implementation of major maintenance needs, because oftentimes for the landowner, it's just more convenient to kind of keep the money and not do what's needed. So this legislation provides a provision that we will see on page 2. It's an addition, page 3. An addition to the paragraph such that the lease agreement, this is either between a school district or a charter school board and the lessor, the lease agreement shall separately identify the amount to be expended on the major maintenance of the building or facility during the term of the lease, and that amount to be expended on the major maintenance shall be accounted for and reported separately. And here's the key provision: and shall not be transferred or expended for any other purpose other than major maintenance of the leased building. And then the final sentence on line 9, no expenditure shall be made from the funds dedicated for major maintenance of a leased facility without the approval of the district or the charter school. So it provides financial oversight of the funds that are intended to be used for major maintenance so that they actually are used for major maintenance. It's a simple cleanup. It doesn't change the amount that would go into the lease. It has no fiscal impact, but it provides either our school board or our charter school board with financial oversight of the major maintenance funds to ensure that they are spent for the purpose of serving our children. Madam Chairman, thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Discussions on the bill. There's a committee of the whole amendment. Senator Hicks.
Madam Chairman, could I have that amendment read in?
Senate File 83, Committee of the Whole, Amendment Number 1, page 3, line 11, after.
Senator Hicks.
I move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 83. And just a real quick explanation, I visited with the minority floor leader last night about this issue. My concern is when it comes to charter schools and some of our very small rural schools out there, if they're in a situation where they may be in a lease arrangement that has a major maintenance component within that lease, they may or may not have the expertise to make a determination as to whether that's a reasonable cost. So if you're going to spend $1.5 million replacing a roof, you don't have construction people, within that charter school organization or these small schools. This just says permissively that they may consult, Madam Chairman, with the school facilities division to kind of get an opinion on that as to whether that's a reasonable cost associated with those type of major maintenance projects. If there's no more questions, Madam Chairman, I'd ask for the question on this amendment.
Discussion on the amendment. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Great amendment. Thank you. Vote aye.
Any further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Hicks' motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 83, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. The motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 83 has passed. We are back on the bill. Seeing no discussion and question being, Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question, I'm not familiar with all this. Do we have a lot of these properties that we lease across the state? I'm curious, why don't we own them if we're putting that kind of maintenance dollars into them? So thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the most part, our school facilities for the state owns assets and properties. It's far less frequent for leasing to occur. There certainly are lease arrangements that take place. A lot of those relate to charter schools around the state. It's frequent for charter schools to lease their facility. In at least one case, the school facilities department ended up coming back and buying the facility that was being leased because it was economically in the interest of the state to do so. In another circumstance, about 5 years ago, our school facilities department reviewed the facility for purchase and decided not to purchase it because in the long run, it would save the money or save the state money not to purchase it. So those decisions are considered. those opportunities are considered, and then decided based on what makes financial sense for the state. So there are a few of these, but when they take place, we want to make sure that we're not wasting the state's and the taxpayers' money through the lease agreements. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, question being called. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 83, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Senate File 83 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 99.
Senate File 99, Witnessing of Wills Remote Methods, an act relating to wills, sponsored by Senator Barlow, was referred to Committee Number 1, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Case, Cooper, Furphy, Landon, and Schuler. Senator Landon, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Senator Landon?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a do pass recommendation on Senate File 99. For an explanation of this bill, I would ask that you call on the good sponsor, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask for your favorable consideration of Senate File 99. Members, this was brought to me by several folks who actually both practice law and work within healthcare facilities. Now, you will note there is a standing committee amendment which changes the scope of this a bit. So, and that what they had learned and been concerned about is oftentimes.
Representative Barlow, or excuse me, Senator Barlow, would you like that amendment read in?
Sure, Madam Chairman, we can read it in at this time.
Senate File 99, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 15.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the bill, as originally drafted, absent the amendment, was to allow circumstances where a healthcare facility had restrictions that disallowed individuals come into the healthcare facility and witness for wills, as you know, so you can understand the circumstance of it. When it went to committee, and I thank the committee and one of my co-sponsors for taking this up, as I was in another committee and unable to participate in the presentation of the bill, they decided that actually remote witnessing made sense in a broader context. We already have adopted it for notarial services. There are other instruments that do not require witnessing. As long as we specified in the bill, or as long as the language in the bill specified that the individual had to be able to attest to the competency of the signor. And you'll see that language on page 2, the new Romanet B, the opportunity to judge line 18, the opportunity to judge the competency of the testor. So really this is a continuing burden upon the witnesses to ensure that they can make that determination, even in a remote setting. Madam Chairman, I would move Senate File 99, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, and present it at this time. And what this amendment does, Madam Chairman, to the in the discussion of the committee on lines 15 and 16, it strikes the last two words on 15, due to, and then all of line 16. Minus the comma, my apologies, minus the comma. And so what this does is it makes it more broadly applicable for the use of remote witnessing. So Madam Chairman, I think that is the entirety of the bill. What you'll see, the remainder of the bill is conforming language as to the attestament forms themselves or examples thereof. I'd be glad to stand for any questions, Madam Chairman. As for call the question on the standing committee amendment, if there are no questions.
Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor of Senator Barlow's motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 99, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The motion to adopt Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 has passed. We are back on the bill. Is there discussion on the bill? Seeing none, question being called, all those in favor of Senator Landon's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of File 99, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Senate File 99 has passed Committee of the Whole. Senator Landon, just want to make sure we're all awake. Senator Landon, would you mind coming up and running the committee of the whole while I present a bill?
I'm special. I got the hammer.
All right, now that the hammer is down, hi, Gally. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 84. Would the reading clerk please read the Senate file?
Senate File 84, Education Model Student Attendance Policies, sponsored by Senator Ellis, an act relating to education, was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Beitman, Brennan, Rothfuss, Scott, and Steinmetz. Senator Scott, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the Senate file. What is your pleasure, Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I move in the committee of the whole rise and report it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 84 do pass. There was a standing committee amendment, and I ask it be read in at this time.
Senate File 84, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 3, line 12, delete.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move adoption of the standing committee amendment, and for an explanation of both the amendment and the Senate file, I yield to the sponsor of the bill, Senator Ellis.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you another bill related to an issue that we've worked on extensively in this chamber, and it relates to absenteeism and truism. As you know, over the past several years, we've worked to make sure that all of our statutes actually work together. We've provided some really important clarifying definitions so we can determine whether or not a student's absence is due to their own absence or whether or not it's the fault of the parent. Unfortunately, we've, despite all the progress we've made, we still have some outstanding issues, and one of them being that not all of our districts are getting up to speed on revising their policies. So what this bill would do, Mr. Chairman, is simply instruct the new state superintendent of public instruction to develop model rules and policies for student attendance, including definitions for unexcused absence, habitual truant, and willful absenteeism. As an example of how our districts are maybe not getting up to speed on revising their policies, I recently had a situation where I needed to take my kids out of school. I called their schools, all three of them, different schools, 1 month in advance to ask if we could make arrangements, explain that we would have educational opportunities, but that we needed to do during our trip, and was told that there's a blanket no policy on excusing such absences. So in looking at my district's policy again, just to refresh some members, a lot of district policies look like this. If a student has 5 or more unexcused absences in one school year, the district attorney shall be notified of the student's habitual truancy. We've had a lot of conversations in this body about providing parents with flexibility, which would encourage them to work with their school districts to make arrangements in advance, rather than waiting for a student or using the student's illness and calling in sick as the excuse. When I take these things seriously, in visiting with my school district, they said, well, we'll use our discretion. We won't necessarily contact the DA, but that's not the message parents are getting. And so this model policy could be a very important tool for parents that want to advocate to their districts to get in line with some of the best practices that are out there. The second part of this bill has to deal with the definition itself of what constitutes an unexcused absence. During our hearing on this bill, we heard testimony from a student who told us that her brother had committed suicide. She had been struggling with his loss and grieving his loss and had taken some days off for her mental health. Those absences were not excused by her school district. So this would, on page 2, on the bottom lines there, indicate that as long as the absences don't significantly affect the student's academic performances, that mental health can be included as excused absences. Finally, the bill, and this will get to the amendment, requires this superintendent to take certain action. Initially, we had selected July 1st, 2023 as the date on page 3, lines 12 and 17, to develop those policies and to report to the Joint Interim Committee of the Joint Education Interim Committee. In visiting with the department, because of some of the other demands that we're asking of them, they were hoping to extend that deadline to December 1st. And given all of the responsibilities we've asked of the superintendent, we thought that was a reasonable request. So with that, I'd ask for any questions on the standing committee amendment, which would extend the deadline from July to December 1st.
Questions on the standing committee amendment? All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion to adopt standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 84, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment has passed. Back to you, Senator Ellis.
With that, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill.
Questions or discussion on Senate File 84? All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, do so with a due pass recommendation on Senate File 84, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. That bill has passed Committee of the Whole. Senator Ellis.
The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 51. Will the reading clerk please read the Senate file?
Senate File 51, School Finance Regional Cost Adjustment, sponsored by the Education Committee, an act relating to school finance. Was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Spikeman, Brennan, Scott, and Steinmetz. No, Senator Rothfuss. Senator Scott, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the Senate file. What is your pleasure, Senator Scott?
Madam Chairman, I move when the Committee of the Whole rise and report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 51 do pass. There is a standing committee amendment. Let me explain the bill and then I'll ask the standing committee amendment be read in. Madam Chairman, we've got a problem in schools in our state. In the northwest corner of the state in Teton County and the Star Valley area of Lincoln County, the cost of living there, because the cost of property has gotten so high, is just out of sight, and they're having difficulties maintaining the schools up there because they can't pay enough for the teachers to be able to afford to live there. And they're experiencing significant turnover in their personnel, and their certified personnel, losing quite a number of teachers. So what this bill does is essentially it puts a Band-Aid on it. It allows, as an option, the school district to, instead of taking a 3-year average on the cost of living, to take just the most recent year, which when you're having rapid inflation can be quite important. And you can see the effect in the fiscal note at the back of the bill, which I believe to be accurate, in the fiscal year 2025, for example, it will be $440,000 that the schools districts there will get more than they would under the current system. Madam Chairman, what happened in committee was that there was concern raised that we're building in just a permanent escalator, permanent increase in the school funding. And so we've got a real problem right now because of the degree of inflation that's going on, particularly in the real estate prices in those areas. And so what we did was we put in a classic sunset date to try to deal with that. And that's standing committee amendment. If I could have that read in at this time.
Senate File 51, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 4, after.
Senator Scott?
Madam Chairman, I move adoption of the standing committee amendment. Madam Chairman, you can see it, that the amendment is just lengthy for the mechanical reasons of putting it in, but you can see the sunset date right at the bottom of the page. The sentence is, this subdivision is repealed July 1, 2026, and that's referring, the subdivision in question here is on the amendment, lines 24 through 42. So that will force a relook at this whole problem. it may well change as the real estate inflation value has been quite rapid recently. Goodness knows what's going to happen next. They're making other efforts to solve some of the problems, looking for the ability to build some teacherages on some state land up there that we own. They're trying to get creative in ways to solve this. And so we don't want to build something in permanently. And it may spread to another district or two. That's a possibility, particularly in the areas where there are high real estate values up in that northwest corner of the state. So the effect of the sunset date will be that we'll use this bill, the change of this bill makes, until the next recalibration, and it will expire after the session that we deal with the next recalibration, and it will force consideration in that recalibration process of the whole regional cost adjustment system, and is it adequate to meet everybody's needs. And frankly, I think that's a good thing. I think it'll help us get a recalibration, which we need to do, given the problems we've been having there. So for all those reasons, Madam Chairman, I urge adoption of the Standing Committee amendment.
Discussion on the Standing Committee amendment. Senator Hicks and then Senator Rothfuss.
Madam Chairman, excuse me, on and for the amendment. Without this amendment, I think the bill has some real problems, because what it effectively does is bake in an automatic increase into the model that you never get a vote on, and it's problematic. The Senate's taken positions on this through the last recalibration effort, that this was a problematic section in the model. But I think the amendment goes a long ways to help fix that. On and for the amendment, I think we need to adopt this amendment if we're going to send this bill out of here. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On and against the amendment, and not because I'm against the idea of having a sunset, but because of the approach to the sunset. Madam Chairman, I think it's important to realize that this repeals the entirety of the regional cost adjustment, which is an aspect of the funding model that is required by the Constitution in the interpretation of the Campbell decisions. So without an RCA, it is unconstitutional. We could easily have an amendment that simply repeals the provision of this bill. That's not a challenge. In fact, we had a couple of those drafts in front of us. But the decision of the committee was to bring forward a full repeal of the RCA, and the motivation for that was consistent with what the good tall senator from Natrona County said, which was a desire really to offer the opportunity to fully repeal the RCA as an impetus for studying the RCA. So the regional cost adjustment, the RCA, is additional funding required by the Campbell decisions to recognize differential costs throughout the state. And there's a complicated formula for how that's calculated, which we fortunately don't have to go into right now. But it's an essential part of the funding model. And it's the concern I have with the bill, and it was the justification for my vote against the bill, despite being a supporter of the bill during the interim, because it is a useful bill in its original form. Madam Chairman, the concern I have is that this was a little bill, right? This was a little bill with a few $100,000 up to maybe $1 million over a few years of implication to the state, which you may or may not like as a body, and there's reasons to support it or to oppose it. The amendment is one of the most significant things we'd potentially be voting on in this session, because it represents at least $40 million per year of implication after the sunset date. So it's a giant amendment of a sunset into a tiny bill, which is clearly outside of the purpose of the original bill. There was no intent to sunset the entirety of the regional cost adjustment during the education interim in any way, shape, or form. And that's the scope, Madam Chairman, of this particular amendment. So, Madam Chairman, with that, even though there's some merit certainly to having a sunset, at this point, I would object to the scope of this amendment, consistent with Senate Rule 11-6, which states that pursuant to Article 3, Section 20 of the Wyoming Constitution, no bill shall be so altered or amended on its passage through the Senate as to change its original purpose, and would request that the amendment be withdrawn and redrafted for second reading, consistent with our rules.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss.
And Madam Chairman, that's an appeal to you on a rule.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Senator Scott?
Madam Chairman, this is the traditional sort of sunset that we do. We get, the regional cost adjustment has a problem. It's not adjusting adequately for a particular part, a couple of districts in the northwestern part of the state, where the real estate values have just exploded. And with our system, you know, we're recapturing, I think the testimony was 70 million a year currently from up there due to those high real estate values coming into our coffers. And the courts won't let us use that directly, let them solve the problems that's causing that, a great inflow. So we've put a Band-Aid on with this bill, but the fear is that the Band-Aid either won't be adequate or will be a permanent building escalator, depending on how you look at it. And so the remedy for that is the next time we're going to have a look at the whole thing, which is the recalibration. Let's sunset this portion of the thing, the whole regional cost adjustment, because that's where the problem is. It's not doing the adequate job, and let's have a look at it. And that does potentially mean that it will help force us to do a recalibration bill, which we have not done for a while successfully. And this will mean that if there's a difference between the two houses, there'll be a negotiation in good faith with a need to arrive at a result. So, Madam Chairman, we've allowed this kind of sunset many times. It's a rational way to deal with a problem that a bill raises where we're not sure whether the results will work long-term or whether the system will need a redo. And I think it's perfectly germane to the bill, Madam Chairman, and I would urge you to rule that it is in order, and I would urge us to adopt the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Scott. The chair rules that the amendment is in order. Further discussion on the amendment? Senator Rothfuss?
I'd call for a Rules Committee. Thank you.
Okay. We will proceed to a meeting of the Rules Committee, or decision from the Rules Committee. The Senate will be at ease. Or excuse me, the Committee of the Whole will be at ease. Order. Committee of the Whole will come to order. The Rules Committee voted 3-2 to sustain the ruling of the chair. We are still on the amendment. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd appeal the decision of the Rules Committee, to the body, and believe it would be appropriate for us to discuss this as a body. I think it's a very important consideration, and the decision of the Rules Committee, which supported the concept that this is consistent with statute, in my view, would change the way that we've done business in this Senate and dramatically expand the scope of what is allowed through the amendment process. And I hope the body will very thoughtfully weigh in. So, Madam Chairman, to take a look at this in detail, since we didn't directly debate it, the decision with regard to the amendment, looking at the title, well, first I'll start with the rule and what the basis of this decision is on, because I think it's important to understand the obligations of the Senate, Madam Chairman. So looking at Rule 11.6, which is a restatement of the Wyoming Constitution. So this is a constitutional binding of how the Senate shall operate. 11.6, Madam Chairman, says, scope of amendments. Pursuant to Article 3, Section 20 of the Wyoming Constitution, no bill shall be so altered or amended on its passage through the Senate as to change its original purpose. So that's the key phrase, change its original purpose, and you have to contemplate a little bit, what was the original purpose of the bill? Clearly, if a bill does the opposite of what it started off doing, that's going to be a simple analysis of change. But let's contemplate this amendment. The original bill, which was worked through the Education Committee in the interim, had an original purpose, and that purpose is clarified through the long title that you see, where we see that it's an act relating to school finance, and very specifically, a narrow title modifying the Wyoming Cost of Living Index as used in the regional cost adjustment within the Education Resource Block Grant model as specified. So the only modification intended through the title worked through the interim in the Education Committee, where we had the opportunity to draft as expansively or narrowly as we chose to amend one thing through the purpose, one thing, and that is the cost of living index in the regional cost adjustment. That's the entire scope. So when we contemplate the amendment now, it has a sunset date, which a sunset date would certainly be germane if it sunsetted just the scope of the bill. Not only would it be germane, but it would not change the original purpose of the bill, adding that sunset, because the bill would still accomplish the same purpose. It would just then potentially be repealed at a later date. Narrow purpose, that narrow purpose potentially repealed, that's consistent with the Constitution. But the expansive nature, Madam Chairman, of this particular amendment would repeal the entirety of the regional cost adjustment. That was never contemplated in the interim. That was never discussed. It is a very different bill, certainly a bill that's in order. We could draft that legislation. We could bring it here to sunset the regional cost adjustment, and that could be what the public came to the Education Committee to debate. Certainly no member of the public knew they were showing up for the opportunity to decide whether or not the regional cost adjustment would be terminated in a couple of years, a constitutional requirement pursuant to a Supreme Court decision. The public was not noticed on that. It was a dramatic and significant change. Contemplate an extreme example of this, which, if we allow this particular amendment to move forward, seems like it would also be appropriate. Repeal the entire school foundation program. This legislation relates to the school foundation program. If we're allowed to repeal the RCA, why not repeal the entire school foundation program through this? Because it relates. It certainly was not contemplated, Madam Chairman, that we would have a change through amendment to repeal orders of magnitude greater portions of our statute as a simple amendment, a tweak in subcommittee. That is clearly and unquestionably a change to the original purpose of the bill. Now, Madam Chairman, on second reading, if we want to come back with a sunset provision that repeals this particular bill and what the bill does, I'll sign on. I'll support the bill after that. That's fine. Perfectly reasonable. But Madam Chairman, the idea that we would say because regional cost adjustment is mentioned, we can repeal the entirety of it in statute and that doesn't change the purpose of the bill is truly an unconstitutional approach to trying to justify the ends through this unconstitutional means. We're setting a standard here and where we want the bar. If we want a high bar of adherence to the Wyoming Constitution in this chamber, we will reject this amendment and reject the decision of the chair. If we want to eliminate that bar to the point where all amendments are in order, well, this is a good opportunity to vote aye. I don't want to vote aye, and I would encourage the body to vote no and override the chair. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. This is a debatable motion, so we can discuss it. At the conclusion of our debate, we will do a roll call vote, and the passage of the appeal requires a simple majority. Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, I'll leave it to the experts, but I don't think we can do a roll call vote in committee of the whole. Madam Chairman, I will defend the decision that was made by the chair and the Rules Committee. And let's look at what we're doing here. You look at the title of the bill, we're modifying the cost of living index used in the regional cost adjustment within the Education Block Resource Grant. What we're doing here with the amendment is doing that. We're putting in a sunset date. And a sunset date has been used ever since I can remember in my time down here as a time-honored way of compromising an issue where we see something needs to be done. We have some questions, and the questions here were about the validity of the way we're approaching it in this particular bill, which does solve the fact that that whole regional cost adjustment doesn't work for a portion of our state. And it's a relatively small portion, but a very valuable portion in many ways. The Star Valley and Teton County specifically may spread to some other counties. The Band-Aid that the bill puts in was criticized as being an additional just escalator that will drive up the cost of education. And we need to have another look at it in terms of how does it fit with the whole of the school finance system, because the whole thing has got to work. And it's got to work for everybody. And so putting in a sunset date, typically a sunset date will remove a section of the relevant section of the law, so that if we're going to continue to have that section of the law, we have to pass a bill all the way through the legislature. And that forces some compromises. That's the purpose of a sunset date. And it's been a very effective tool that we've used many times. So I don't think we're plowing any new ground here or doing anything unusual. We're doing something that enables us to fix the problem that the bill is aimed at, and then enables us to get a more permanent fix after we've seen what's going to happen to the cost of living up there? How's it going to affect other districts going forward? How does it fit into the context of the whole regional cost adjustment? So that, Madam Chairman, I think is entirely appropriate, and I think we should sustain the chair, go ahead and adopt the amendment and adopt the bill.
Further discussion, Senator Landon, and before I go to you, I just received a note from the chief clerk that we will not need a roll call vote. If it is close, we will do a standing division. Senator Landon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wasn't going to rise on this bill. I'm not entirely surprised at the ruling, because I think perhaps there's some things that are preordained here, but I actually appreciate the good chairman. He's quite the orator, and he does an awesome job with things. He just happens to be wrong on this one. We haven't done this kind of thing, hardly ever. We do use sunset dates, but we're usually pretty careful about making sure that they're vetted and run by the public. This title says that this is an act relating to school finance and modifies the Wyoming Cost of Living Index as used in the regional cost adjustment. Says nothing about sunsetting it, nothing about getting rid of it. When we get to the debate on the actual amendment itself, I just have some questions about why we would cede our authority as the 67th and push it down the road saying, well, we got rid of this regional cost adjustment and we're going to leave it up to future legislators to fix it. That doesn't make any sense to me. But in the meantime, we're debating whether or not this is constitutional. I say no, it's really not. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment? Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Madam Chairman. So we need to really understand what we're doing here. It's been thrown out here that we're repealing a section of the block model. I can't find a repealer in there. Don't say anything that's been repealed. It has been stated over and over again that we're repealing a section of statutes, and I haven't found a repealer yet, Madam Chairman. There's a sunset in there. And then I hear this discussion about how this is going to reduce all the school funding and we're going to set the model on its head. I can't find that in there. It says modify the regional cost adjustment. I can't find all these black helicopters that are flying into this bill. It has already been presupposed that for some reason that the sunset date is going to destroy the resource block model, and I can't find that. I can just find a sunset in there that says, we're going to come back, because this is really important, the regional cost adjustment. Folks, we've gone through more sessions and more boom and bust crash in the last 4 years in Wyoming's economy than any time in the history. It just hasn't been that long ago. In 2016, oil went no sell. 2020, COVID strikes and our economy collapses. Infusion of federal dollars, all this stuff. This is the reason you use a sunset. So you as the Senate and you as the legislature have an opportunity to come back and revisit these costs associated, which drives the model. There's no repealers in here. There's nothing in here that presupposes the end of the RCA is going to happen. It just says we're going to come back and revisit it, and in light of our economics and the tumultuous revenue streams that we have, that our staff has over and over advised us, you have the most volatile streams of revenue of almost any state in the nation. The other two that are comparable are North Dakota and Alaska, whose economy is driven by mineral extraction. It is appropriate for us to come back and revisit this. On and for the ruling, hope you support the amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment, on the appeal, Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. This is just a great process, a great way we're handling this today. Good debate. Madam Chairwoman, I'm with the senators that want to vote no on sustaining the chair. A repeal, this is a repealer in a way. It's a repealer with a delayed date. That's a pretty big step about a pretty big issue. And, you know, usually we're really good on sunsets. And I kind of understand everybody saying, well, it's down the road and we're going to fix it before we get there. And that usually probably works out. But the trouble is, we never told anybody that we were going to throw this up in the air and leave it to chance. I'm pretty familiar with repealers this year. We've gone through the Telecom Act and all these things were major policy changes. We use repealers for a purpose, but we let people know that we're working in and proposing a repealer. This is different. This is a hidden zinger. And people that testified in the committee or look at that title of the bill and decide, oh, I don't need to testify because this is only what they're dealing with, they don't know about this. So we should not be doing this.
Thank you. Further discussion on the appeal, Senator Beitman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, like you, Madam Chair, I am a stickler on the rules. I think we have rules for a reason, and the good senator brings up a very valid point. I'm torn because I see also my good chairman's argument, and his argument holds water to me as well. There's two options here. The reason why this bill is even before you today is because of the compromise of the committee. This bill was dead on arrival without this compromise. It would have been dead. We wouldn't be talking right now. So in order for this thing to move through the process, the compromise was, because what you saw with the original bill draft was we allowed the districts to have their cake and eat it too. They could have the greater of the 3-year rolling average, or if the most recent 6 months inflationary report was higher, they get to pick that. My constituents have a serious problem with that, as do I. It bakes it into the model forever. Once it's in, like the other good senator from Baggs says, once it's in there, and there's nothing we can do about it. So there's the crux of the issue. So now, here we are on a rules debate, and it's a good debate. And this is a debate we need to take seriously because there are bills that get gutted in both chambers of this building that probably violate the rules. So I am very sensitive to that. So we have the option. We could go with the motion to vacate the rules or chairman's decision and vote this amendment down, within the bill probably dies. And then we go back and draft a new bill. That's option A. The other option is uphold the ruling of the Rules Committee, pass this amendment, and keep working this bill through the process. This is only committee of the whole. We have other readings that we can work this through. So those are your options. I'm ambivalent.
Thank you. We'll do Senator Salazar, then Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also am struggling. I understand fully how important this is. This is a big thing. I guess the one thing I would ask the minority leader is, for those of us who haven't been in the Senate as long as others, I would like to hear the argument again of this has not been done before. I'd like to hear that argument because I am struggling, and I do appreciate my former chairman. He knows how much I respect him. I sat on 2 years in the Senate Education. I know these are not easy decisions, but if you could indulge me, Mr. Minority Leader. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I think we've been presented with two options, but I think there are a third and maybe several more as we have 2 more readings ahead of us. So I would respectfully say that it's already been offered by the Minority Floor Leader that there is a way to get to the end policy result that this amendment provides without maybe the same language. And I recall in my legislative tenure, a community that I represented in Converse County was in a similar situation. And I unfortunately could not get there fast enough to find how we accomplished that. But we did something similar then, and I don't recall it having some kind of a repealer. I think we set it for 2 school years and then revisited it or something like that. But it did not hold the entire regional cost adjustment at bay to accomplish that for that community, which was dealing with something that was temporal, no doubt, and maybe not sustained like we're seeing in some of our communities, but it was very real. So I think there is a third way out. We do not have to sustain the rule. We can vote the amendment down and bring a second reading amendment that accomplishes the end goal. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Kinski.
Madam Chair, thank you. My concern to my colleague from the middle part of the state, to answer your question, it's not unprecedented. We have these debates routinely. And what we tried to do, at least I tried to do in the Rules Committee, is separate myself from the merits of the argument and limit myself purely to the rules question. Is this amendment within the scope of the bill title, which calls for modification of the RCA? And I concluded that it was. And so I believe we should uphold the ruling of the chair, and there is a second and third reading. These folks will have a chance to try and amend the amendment, and let's move on with it. But on the very narrow question, that's regardless of the merits of the bill, the very narrow question as to whether this amendment is contemplated in the title, the Rules Committee agreed that it is. Something that happens all the time. It's not without precedent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Landon, and then Senator Dockstader.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And to my good friend from the center part of the state, I was the one who made the comment regarding it being a little bit unprecedented. I've been around this part of the world for a long time. And the fact is, we have taken great pride in the Wyoming Senate in doing things the proper way. This one feels like an ambush to me. And that's what I meant when I said that it's pretty unprecedented. We don't operate this way. It steps out of the bounds. I have great respect for the good chairman from the back of the room, and respect the fact that he serves on the Rules Committee and I don't. But I simply disagree. I think that we're stepping a little bit out into some gray area here, and we really don't have to. There are other options if we want to get, and we can talk about, the merits of what's going on here. I think we can get there, but we got to do it the right way. And I don't think this is the right way. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the discussion of precedent setting, I believe I heard in the Rules Committee debate in the room, we can have it out here on the floor as well, but this has been done before. There is precedence. And I think, and I agree with my colleague from the Sheridan country, whether it's your area, my area, or anybody's area, this bill does not work without an opportunity to have a reckoning in a year or two or three. So I would stand with the Rules Committee, and if there's anybody that would like to clarify that precedent setting, open to that as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further discussion on the amendment, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
The appeal, my apologies.
No worries. Madam Chairman, I certainly appreciate the thoughtful debate and how serious the Senate is taking this consideration. I think it's an important decision. Madam Chairman, I do want to address a couple of the questions. The idea that this has been done before, we've amended certainly before. There's no question about it. It's the scope of the amendment that's the key provision. How far outside of that title are we comfortable with? How substantial of a change are we comfortable with? And Madam Chairman, I concur with my colleagues that have stood up and said that this is far beyond our typical amendment. And it doesn't have to be. There's nothing unreasonable or abnormal or out of order about adding a sunset to this. Again, we had a fully constitutional amendment under consideration in the Education Committee that would have sunsetted the provisions of this bill within the scope of the bill. Easy to bring that back on second reading. No crisis, no problem. And Madam Chairman, honestly, if this bill doesn't pass, no crisis, no problem. This is not a bill I'm trying to save through standing up and objecting to this amendment. This is not a bill I'm trying to pass or kill by standing up and objecting to this amendment. The scope of the amendment seems more important to the state of Wyoming and good business and good order in the Wyoming Senate than the bill itself. We need to adhere to our rules and our constitutional obligations. If you're comfortable, senators, with this scope of an amendment, I don't know what we're uncomfortable with. If we bring a small amendment to the severance tax that provides temporary relief, and then somebody puts a sunset on the severance tax of the state of Wyoming for 2 years down the road, is that okay? I hope not. That's the same type of consideration. This is a serious consideration. Again, as the good senator from the northeastern part of the state noted, we can clean all this up on second reading from a clean it up standpoint and accomplish all the objectives we heard. Everything's trivial. There's solutions to all of them that are constitutional, easy to get done. I'm happy to co-sponsor them. Again, not that important of a bill. This question, colleagues, Senate, this question is important. And getting to the good senator's question from Fremont County, I can think of 2 other times in my 12 years that have sort of reached this level of we're not even going to try to stay within the title. We just want to get something done, Constitution be damned. And I was strongly against both of those. And every time I see anything like this, I'm going to strongly be against it, because the Constitution is what we swear an oath to. It's more important than whether you like this amendment. Don't worry about whether you like this amendment. Don't worry about whether you like this bill. They're secondary to our constitutional obligation. Do you feel comfortable that the public was informed beforehand that the possibility of repealing the regional cost adjustment would be discussed? And there was a suggestion by the majority floor leader, Madam Chairman, that there were no black helicopters in this bill. That's because they're in the amendment. And specifically, they're on line 42. This subdivision is repealed July 1st, 2026. It's true, nothing in the bill mentioned a repeal. That's accurate. That's why we're changing its purpose. And that's why I ask the body to join me in overruling the decision of the Rules Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further discussion, Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, let's stick to what we're about here. We're seeking a compromise on the bill. One of the classic compromises, especially when people have long-term concerns as to what the effect of this will be an ongoing thing, is to put a sunset in. And this is a classic sunset. You repeal the affected section of the bill. That's what we're doing. And it's been an important tool for us over the years, and I think will continue to be. So I think it's important that we do uphold the chair and preserve our ability to maintain this sort of a compromise, because that's what enables us to get things done.
Further discussion, Senator Case, and then Senator Driscoll.
Madam Chairwoman, I think the classic sunset would be if we just repealed the section, just repealed the action that we're doing today. Repealing the entire regional cost adjustment is far from the classic sunset. So that's where I come out on this. And to procedure, when we get to the vote, I think people are confused as whether they should vote aye or vote no for any particular thing. So I hope we'll have a little discussion of that. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator Case. President Driscoll.
Madam Chairman, I'm a little on the same. I think we really need to go straight to the subject. We're kind of into debating what's happening, not what the Rules Committee ruled on. And I'm going to cut it straight to it on my end. And, you know, a couple clarifications. One, public not having notice. How often do they ever have notice on any amendments down here, folks? They come out by the day, and you better be watching. So, you know, we change bills dramatically almost every day here. So that part of it. Let's read what the bill says. School finance regional cost adjustment. That fits, everything we've done fits in there. Then we get down into the title, an act relating to school finance And here's the key word: modifying the Wyoming Cost of Living Index as used in the regional cost adjustment. Is this a modification? Is a sunset a modification? This is what I used. And absolutely, within the word modification, sunset fits. There's a rainbow when you modify. If you're going to modify your car, it's not one headlight unless it specifies that. You're modifying it. And that gives you the entire range from top to bottom. And in my opinion, clearly, this end of it hits. As far as the rest of the arguments you've heard, for everyone that's done it, they've argued the bill. We have 2 more readings to further amend it if you don't like it. What you're voting on is, do we fit within the title? That was the question. Do we fit within the title? And is a sunset within that? And in my opinion, and it's what I said inside, the answer is clearly yes. Is it a big change? The answer is absolutely yes. But modifying gives you that entire range. They didn't change any of it. So vote your conscience on it. It doesn't matter one way or the other how you do it. It's still going to go on, and there's going to be more readings to work on it. It truly is, do you feel like it fits within it? My argument is yes.
Question being called. As a refresher, we are voting on Senator Rothfuss's motion to appeal or overrule the decision of the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee determined that this was germane to the bill and appropriate for the bill. So if you're voting aye, you're voting to overrule the decision of the Rules Committee. If you vote no, then you're voting to sustain the Rules Committee decision. All those in favor of overruling the decision of the Rules Committee, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. The body has voted not to sustain the ruling of the Rules Commission. Division being called. All those in favor of overturning the Rules Committee, please stand. Thank you. All those, please sit. All those who would like to sustain the ruling of the Rules Committee, please stand. Thank you. The motion has been rejected. You have voted to sustain the ruling of the Rules Committee by a vote of 11 to 19. We are back on the amendment. Senator Hicks. Oh, Senator Landon.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman, and great debate regarding the rule. Now that we're back on the amendment, I'm struggling to get there. I have heard repeatedly that this is a system that is broken. I'd like to understand that a little bit better, and then I want to reiterate part of my heartburn with what this amendment has done is that we have ceded authority to somebody down the river a couple years from now. Maybe they'll get to it, maybe they won't. I'd just like to understand, you know, if our desire is to get rid of a regional cost adjustment, good for us. Let's go for it on that. And maybe we can clarify that in the bill, but I'm just really struggling to get there when I keep hearing that it's broken. The only way it would be broken is if we don't fund it. The idea, folks, is that we take care of those communities, essentially, that are closer to Yellowstone Park. And we do have a problem over there, so sunsetting something that we have a problem, it feels like we could certainly continue it and work on it as we go. Can't we fix this during the interim without sunsetting the whole program? That's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment. Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, on the amendment, the problem we've got there, what's broken is the regional cost adjustment is not working. Testimony we had for a couple of our school districts. the one in Teton County, the one in the Star Valley. And the remedy we've come up with is to modify the way the regional cost adjustment works, giving the school districts a choice. And one of the choices is to have just the most recent of the adjustments apply instead of a 3-year rolling average, which gets them relief quicker. There are potentially 2 problems with it. One, there is concern that it's frankly not enough, that the problems are worse than we're dealing with. I think this is a Band-Aid that'll get us through the next few years, but we need to get at how do we modify the whole regional cost adjustment so it works for everybody, not just most everybody. So that's why the amendment for the sunset is important. Second, there's concern that we're building in a permanent escalator that, whether or not being justified, will run up our school education costs unnecessarily, and probably in more regions than just the targeted ones this time. And again, that causes us to say we need to take a look at this in the whole context of the regional cost adjustment, and frankly, the whole context of the school finance system. So for those reasons, this amendment is appropriate so that we can go ahead and put the Band-Aid on. That'll get us through to that recalibration, which is the proper time in our system to look at the whole of the school finance. And for those reasons, Madam Chairman, I strongly urge us to adopt the Standing Committee amendment.
We're on the Standing Committee amendments. Majority Floor Leader Hicks.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I think my colleague from Natrona County asked a good question. Is what's broke? So I would ask you to turn to the last page and under the fiscal note. I'll show you what's broke, folks, and how this has been manipulated. It doesn't work. So if you go down there and it says source of revenue decrease in expenditures, and it provides a write-up, and in the second sentence there starts, under current law, the funding model's RCA is the greater of the 2005 hedonic wage index. We've gone through 2 recalibration efforts, and we recalculated the hedonic wage index. We went and did that. But you know what happened when you do that? Certain schools lose, certain schools go down. And a case example is my colleague from Converse County. The last time we did a recalibration, the hedonic wage index said, oh no, we should put a lot more money to those schools in Converse County. Conversely, as we started to have a decline in the natural gas sector in other parts of the state, the western part of the state, it showed the hedonic wage index should have gone down. And this has happened over and over through the last 2 recalibration efforts, Madam Chairman. And what happens is you get members that are on recalibration committee and they say, oh man, my school's gonna go down. Well, I don't like that. So let's keep the 2005 hedonic wage index. I sit through that process. I watch that. It's broke. It doesn't work. And then let's finish this. What else is broke? It doesn't represent the total cost. So if you don't like the hedonic wage index, then you can take the Wyoming cost of living index. If you're a school district, you can say, forget the hedonic wage index. I want to do the Wyoming cost of living index because that one gets my school more money. So you get to choose between 3. You get 3 alternatives as the school district. It's their choice. You get the hedonic wage index. You can take the Wyoming cost of living index, or you get 1, which means you get the same thing you got last year. So Madam Chairman, let's go back to the hedonic wage index or the Wyoming cost of living index, where we have these boom and bust cycles around the state of Wyoming, and your economy and your costs go up. The differential from my area that was booming in that part of Sweetwater and Carbon County in 2006, all those indexes went up. Conversely, we collapsed in the natural gas industry. We dropped down below that. But what we didn't do is see a reduction in the amount of money in the model that goes through there because I get to choose what I got the year before. So it bakes in a constant level, even when your cost of living goes down, even when the hedonic wage index goes down. The system has been manipulated based on whose school district gets gored. That's why we're using 2005 instead of the last two recalibration efforts, because people could see on the committee and said, I'm not going to stand for a decrease in my school district, Madam Chairman. So we're going to keep using the 2005. The system's broke. Hope that explains what we're trying to fix here.
We are on the amendment. Senator Case.
Madam Chairwoman, I would move to divide the amendment. And the division would be to just take lines 8 through 22 separate from lines 24 through 42. So, and they both go with lines 1 through 6.
The chair rules that's divisible. Senator Case, how would you like to handle that? Which,
However
Division
you
1?
prefer. Division 1, let's call it the lines 9 through 22. I don't wish to speak on Division 1.
Discussion on Division 1. Does anyone need that clarified? Seeing no discussion, Senator Scott?
Madam Chairman, I'm trying to figure out, it's lines, Division 1 is lines 8 through 22.
Senator Scott, it would, Division 1 would include lines 8 through 22, but also 1 through 7. Those would go with both divisions.
Both, okay. Madam Chairman, it doesn't really make any sense to adopt this one without the other, because a good part of the substantive change, I think, is just the punctuation on line 22, and it says salaries shall be computed as follows. If you don't then adopt, I'm confused as to why this would be divided at all. I think you either do the sunset or you don't, and you need the lead-in up here in order to do the sunset, which is down in the second division.
Senator Case?
Madam Chairwoman, well, maybe it'd be easier if we did the second division first, because it's got the substantive change.
Absent objection, we'll move on to Division 2. And Senator Case, can you provide clarification on whether or not you want lines 44 moving on to page 2? And do you want those included in both divisions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. We are on Division 2, which is lines 1 through 7, and then 24 through 44 on page 1, as well as everything on page 2. Senator Case.
Yes, and Madam Chairwoman, I'd like to further divide Division 2, and I'd like to separate out line 42 after the period after the year, so that we separately vote on the clause that says this subdivision is repealed July 1st, 2026. And I would prefer that to be, that could be the first division. Just brings it right to the front.
Chair rules that's divisible. Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, if you put in just, you want, as I understand it, he wants to further subdivide this lower part and have us vote first on the sentence, this subdivision is repealed July 1st, 2026. If we pass this without passing the rest of it, does it work? Madam Chair, and I confess I'm just looking at this kind of a division right at the outset, just to see if it does work. Is it clear if you've removed the other one, what's referred to as this subdivision?
So,
Senator
Madam
Case.
Chairwoman, to that, I withdraw that division request, at least the order part. I reassert it, but let's consider lines 24 through 42 to the period after year as the first segment of that division.
Okay, we are on, I called it Division 2. We're on Division 2. Senator Case?
Absolutely fine, Madam Chairwoman. I would say then with Division 2, the further subdivision of it, the subsection that we would take first, I withdraw my request to deal with line 42 and ask that we further subdivide lines 24 through 42 to the period after the word year. And clearly that will stand by its own, and I yield to the tall senator.
Does everyone understand the division? Senator Scott?
Madam Chairman, you still have two divisions of this clause that's on line 24 through 42. And they both have to, if they both have to stand on their own, there's the one that's just the sentence, the subdivision repealed July 1, 2026. Does that stand on its own? And frankly, I'm looking for guidance. I'm not sure that it does.
The chair ruled that it stands on its own, but if someone wants to challenge that decision, that would be appropriate. Question being called on Division 2, which is lines 24 through the, like 42 through the word year. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The division is passed. Senator Case? So the question being called, which is, we're voting on this, Senator Hicks?
Clarification. If you vote aye, you're removing this line. If you vote no, this line stays in. Is that correct?
No. Senator Case?
Now, we still have the framework of the original amendment, so it takes an affirmative motion to put everything in. So I would request that we vote no on this, which is line 42 after the period.
Okay, so
It gets right at the sunset.
Senator Scott?
Madam Chairman, I would urge us to vote aye. This is the sunset provision, and that's what we've been talking about all along, so I urge us to vote aye.
Further discussion, Senator Kinski?
So an aye keeps the sunset, correct?
Correct, Senator Kinski.
I arise in favor of a yes vote, an aye vote. I think we need to keep the sunset. I think if it's gone, it may be a poison pill for the entire bill. I think the sunset is critical. The only way I would contemplate even supporting this bill is if that sunset's in there, and I'm not even sure, but we're not debating the whole bill. I can get into that later, but I would urge an affirmative vote to keep the sunset in there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Dockstader?
Yeah, thank you. If this is a maneuver just to kill the bill and absolutely opposed to it, we need to have the sunset in there. Keep it in there, please.
Further discussion on the division, Senator Case?
Madam Chairwoman, this is a maneuver to kill the sunset. And then we can thoughtfully consider the implications of that on second reading, third reading, next year. And it restores the bill back to how the bill title reads.
Further discussion on the division? Seeing none, you are voting on line 42. All those in favor to keep line 42's division in, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no.
No.
The division is passed. Senator Case, do we want to go back to Division 1?
Yes, ma'am. I urge people to vote aye on the other division.
Further discussion on Division 1? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. That division is passed. We are back on the bill. Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 51, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The motion has passed. Division being called. All those in favor of the motion, please rise. Thank you. All those opposed, please stand. Thank you. By a vote of 16 to 13, Senate File 51 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairman, I move the Committee of the Whole beg leave to rise and set again.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
Can we have committee reports read in, please?
January 17, 2023. Mr. President, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 88, Hunting Licenses Weighted Bonus Points System, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Grew, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman. January 17, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 3, Retail Liquor License Fees, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Landon, and Scott. Conflict, Senator Case. Senator Case, Chairman. January 17, 2023, Mr. President, Committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 75, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations Amendments, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Barlow, Boner, Case, Landon, and Scott. Senator Case, Chairman. Mr. President, January 17, 2023, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 56, Prohibiting Travel Across Private Land for Hunting Purposes, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Ellis, Grew, Jones, and Schuler. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President, I request a re-referral of Senate File 43 EMS districts sponsored by Senator Case to, from corporations to labor. Committee 10.
Objection so ordered. Thank you. Also announcement, Wyoming Muni Federal Credit Unions is sponsoring lunch in 54 if you want a good tasty lunch, so downstairs. You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Oh, Senator Kinski.
Mr. President, your Senate Appropriations Committee will be meeting today in W113 at 1 p.m. to consider Senate File 66, School Capital Construction Funding, and Senate File 97, Education Trust Fund Transfer, after which we will have an executive session. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I've been asked to request the transfer of Senate File 123 that was read in this morning from Committee 4 to Committee 8 because it deals more with military affairs. And Mr. President, I do not have a copy of the bill, so I cannot read you the title. It's one of Senator Boner's bills.
I'll interrupt real quick. I've just been told I can't re-refer bills while we're in a Senator Case. Senator Case.
I didn't think there was a motion yet. There was a motion about committee of the whole, but I don't believe there was a motion on the Senate, so should
Okay.
I?
We have not got the motion, so you're in order to re-refer. Senator Scott,
And may I just tag on? It's not quite in order yet to do committee announcements because we haven't had a motion to recess for lunch.
I missed the motion, and that is my bad, and I apologize.
I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah. So, Senator Scott.
123 from Committee 4 to Committee 8 because it subject matter more deals with the military.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move we stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Thank you. Are there any announcements? Senator Landon.
Thank you. Mr. President, just a heads up to the Judiciary Committee, or Committee 1, will meet today upon adjournment in Capital Extension Room 4 to take up a couple of important bills. Senate File 23 is the Treatment Courts Transfer to Judicial Branch Bill. Senate File 100, Designation of Spouses, Revocation upon Divorce or Annulment. Those two bills we will take up on adjournment this afternoon. And then we will meet at 7:30 in the morning, Mr. President. Your Judiciary Committee will then take up in the morning Senate File 34, Trespass by Small Unmanned Aircraft, continued over from last Friday. Senate File 54, Judges Housing Allowance, and Senate File 91, Creation of Tenancy by the Entirety. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any further announcements? Senator Biteman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 3, Revenue, will meet today, 30 minutes upon noon recess in the Capitol Room, Extension Room W6, to hear the following bills: Senate File 103, Sales Tax Exemption, State Legislators; Senate File 104, Property Tax Mill Levy Adjustment; and Senate File 39, Board of Equalization. Questions before the board.
Thank you. Further announcements. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, Senate Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet today upon adjournment 15 minutes after in Capitol Extension Room 2 and online to consider Senate File 27, Weed and Pest Mitigation Tribal Inclusion, Senate File 28, Livestock Infectious Disease Control Tribal Inclusion, Senate File 68, Prescriptive Easement for Water Conveyances, Senate File 96, Omnibus Water Bill Planning and Administration, and if time permits, Senate File 82, Eligible Water and Sewer Projects Funding. Thank you, Mr. President.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Senate will stand recessed till 2 p.m.